Welcome to the Cannabis Pioneers Show. As we move closer to the anticipated legalization of California on January 1st of 2018, I'm thrilled to be speaking with a first-time guest who I greatly respect and I think will provide many valuable nuggets of information to us today. He's Leslie Bocskor, and his insights, expertise, and global stature make him the man who policymakers, investors, and entrepreneurs seek out for future planning and immediate fixing. Bocskor has become one of the most influential people in the cannabis space in guiding policy and reform. Leslie, how are you today?
I'm very well. Good to speak with you.
You deal with government officials as part of your role as founder of Electrum Partners. What are some of the considerations made in Washington, D.C. regarding cannabis at the moment?
It's a very good question, and it is a very complex answer. And the answer is complex because you're dealing with not just the actual reality, which would make it very easy. You're dealing with the result of decades of propaganda, lies, and disinformation that had no data backing it and were spread with the equivalent of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of media through the government outlets, essentially. And I don't mean government outlets like newspapers. I mean just through government policy that ends up being the equivalent of a propaganda machine. And so the policy over that time has created a negative view. The reality is that regulation of cannabis produces a market that is effectively getting it out of the hands of kids, that is reducing the black market and the associated negatives, such as the criminal elements, such as violent crimes associated with the black market and more. You're taking the capital that would otherwise be flowing out of the United States and going to criminal cartels around the world that engage in all sorts of horrible activities, such as killing law enforcement officers, and you're now capturing that money in the United States, creating jobs and wealth with it, and creating revenue. And that revenue is then used as a source for law enforcement, substance abuse counseling, and education, most importantly.
Interesting.
Additionally, by regulating it, you are now eliminating the need to have our criminal justice system bear the burden economically of incarcerating hundreds of thousands of people a year. The cost of the arrest, the courts, and the incarceration can be in the tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, per person per year. So you're talking about what would end up being tens of billions of dollars to states and the federal government that is being spent currently on jailing people for something they shouldn't be jailed for. Once we're regulating it, that stops happening. So you have a double, two forces at bear that are producing a single result. The two forces are a reduction in tax burden to the taxpayer because they no longer have to be covering the cost of the criminal justice system processing and housing inmates that are in jail because of cannabis. That burden being lessened on the taxpayer creates the ability for that revenue to go in other places, that much needed money to go in other places. At the same time, you're creating new revenue. So when you look at the actual effect, it's not just creating a very large industry in the tens of billions of dollars, if not more, with billions of dollars in revenue. You're reducing the burden on the taxpayer at the same time, so you're actually getting a much bigger benefit than you would just based upon looking at the actual industry itself. So those are the positives. Those are the considerations from the positive side. Revenue for education, for substance abuse counseling, for law enforcement. You're looking at a reduction in the black market. You're looking at keeping it out of the hands of kids. You're looking at reducing the burden on the taxpayer. You're looking at creating wealth and jobs in an economy that so desperately needs it. And then you look at the secondary effects, the secondary order effects, like the fact that it improves quality of life for people, that it reduces opiate addiction, that it reduces prescription painkiller opiate deaths by significant numbers. when you have regulated cannabis. And so the overarching effects are more positive than anyone really currently discusses in DC, although they're starting to understand it. On the negative side is the decades of policy that has been based upon propaganda, lies, and disinformation that has created this idea that cannabis is a gateway drug, when in fact, cannabis is an exit drug, not a gateway.
Interesting.
So those are the opposing forces to see.
What is your take on what's behind this global resurgence in interest with the medical and recreational attributes of this plant?
Well, you know, this is a number of different things. It's a generational issue, it's a cultural issue, and it's an informational issue. So you have, on the one hand, you have the internet, which over the last 20 years has made the sum total of human knowledge available to anybody that has a smartphone. And there are billions of smartphones in the world today. So the amount of information that people can get is no longer limited to what the government will feed you. It's now available to anyone, anywhere. Or no longer limited to what major media properties will get you. Now there's a lot more information out there. Culturally, the generations, what they say that what was shocking to one generation to the next generation becomes normal. And so this is another example of that. In the same way that people would never, in generations ago, people had to go to the beach wearing clothes that covered them from ankle to wrist and to neck. And they would have to wear a bathing suit that was essentially an entire body unitard. But today, people go to the beach, and nude beaches are having, a big, forget about that. People go to the beach and they wear much less clothing, my point is. And so, and that's an example of a cultural change from generation to generation. The idea of going to the beach and what people would wear today, decades ago, would have been thought as shocking. But now it's looked at as the norm. And in the same way that people looked at different things as shocking, now they look at it as the norm. In the same way cannabis use was thought of as, unacceptable a generation ago or 2 generations ago, now people see it for what it is, which is something that is completely okay and in fact very positive. And so that's one of the major shifts that we've seen. We have seen that information is available, and we're seeing that the world is evolving to actually see the truth and the data behind it. And as that truth starts to come out, it becomes obvious that prohibition is a failed policy that was never based upon anything that made sense. Leslie,
California, how big of a deal is it?
It's the biggest thing we've seen for the legal cannabis industry to date. California is the 6th or 7th biggest economy in the world, depending upon where you read about it. And certainly it is going to change the world in terms of how we look at cannabis prohibition and cannabis regulation. And the California market will likely cause Mexico to move fairly quickly. The California market will probably be doing a lot of forcing a lot of change that's going to be incredibly positive. And so I think it's going to create a very big news cycle for months about the California market opening up. I think that will affect other markets and other jurisdictions, both countries and states in the United States and countries outside of the United States. I think it will raise valuations for the business industry overall. I think it will increase the amount of capital that's coming into the industry. I think that transactions like the Constellation Brands transaction with Canopy Growth, I believe, over the weekend that was announced, you'll see more transactions like that. You're going to see more large pooled equity funds being announced and raising capital and deploying capital in the industry. You're going to be hearing about more celebrities getting involved in it. You're going to be hearing more about facilities for people to actually go have, consume cannabis together, whether it is through vaping it, or through restaurants that have microdose edibles and meals, or whether it is through Smoking it, you're going to see more people involved publicly in the equivalent of bars that cater to alcohol. You'll see the same type of thing happening for lounges for cannabis. And so we're going to see a number of things change or be pushed through the massive shift that the California market being established will create. Does that make sense?
Is the big money going to be made with companies touching the plant, or those providing the tools for the producers, the cultivators, etc.? Or do you see both models as business opportunities?
I see them all as business opportunities. First, I see touching the plant you'll see generational wealth created in businesses that touch the plant. You're going to see many billionaires created in businesses that are owned that touch the plant. You'll see ancillary businesses that don't touch the plant. Multiple billionaires created, businesses worth billions and billions of dollars being created in businesses that don't touch the plant. But I'll give you a funny little aphorism that I heard regarding this. People always say, well, who made the money during the gold rush? It wasn't the people getting the gold, although they made money. It was the people that sold the picks and shovels. Well, that's true. The people that sold the picks and shovels made money. The people that got the gold made money. But somebody said to me, the people that really made all the money during the gold rush, it's the people with the money that funded all of the businesses, whether they were picks and shovels or getting the gold. And so the sources of capital I'm paying a tremendous amount of attention to, because it's going to be the capital sources and the investors that stand in many ways to see the biggest returns as a result of this.
Leslie, in a nutshell, how important can cannabis become to the U.S. jobs market?
Yes, I can. And I have something to say to this that I hope you'll find interesting, and I hope that your audience will find interesting. So people think of cannabis and they just primarily think of adult use because that's the shiny object. That's what gets all the attention. The cannabis industry and everything regarding this end of prohibition is much bigger than just that, though. Adult use cannabis, according to Rand Corp in 2010, was $42 billion a year, the illegal adult use market in the United States. That market, by some, the size of the black market has probably increased as cannabis has become more prevalent. Maybe it's been decreasing in some regards because the Colorado market really hurt the black market and Mexican farmers had to stop growing. But the real sort of level set that I'd like to do is this. Adult use, people say it could be, $20, $30 billion within 5, 6, 7 years. I think the number is much closer to the black market size, which is closer to $40 to $50 billion. Pharmaceuticals based upon the cannabis plant. Ryan Adams here in Nevada once said to me, and he's one of the owners of a business here in northern Nevada, he said that cannabis is going to change the narrative around the pharmaceutical industry, around the idea of whole plant-based therapies. Because this proof that's come out of Israel in clinical trial that the entourage effect is real, suggesting that isolating the compounds in the plant are not as effective as using the whole plant and looking the effect that the whole plant has therapeutically, is going to start being translated into other plants. So we ultimately see the pharmaceuticals based upon cannabis and its derivatives probably approaching, maybe $80 to $100 billion over the next 10 to 20 years. When you look at the nutraceutical and supplement industry, it's nearly $360 billion worldwide by some estimates. I think that comes from the big expo that takes place here in Vegas every year for the supplement and nutraceutical industry. There are some guesses, some estimates that currently say that for a period of time while cannabis deregulation cannabis drop of prohibition and regulation happens, that you will see the cannabis plant be the source of 10 to 20% of the new products and the total products in the nutraceutical and supplement industry for a period of time. So that could be 20, 30, 50, 60, 70 billion dollars a year in nutraceuticals and supplements, potentially over a period of 20 years per year, ultimately peaking at something like that. There is the ancillary market, which is B2B and B2C, in the same way that people go buy wine glasses and corkscrews and that homes get built with bars in them and all of these things. There will be a significant market just to cater to the consumer for the B2C lifestyle around the adoption of regulated cannabis markets. There will also be an enormous B2B market with agriculture, technology, and more. That could be, once again, some people say it will be bigger than the adult use market, 50, 60, $70 billion a year. The veterinary use of cannabis. It turns out that cannabis and hemp were used in animal agriculture years ago and likely will be used in animal agriculture again. And then the big market, the one nobody talks about, or not that much, that I talk about a lot, is hemp. Hemp hemp plastic was used in one of Henry Ford's early cars. And he said that hemp plastic was potentially a better material to manufacture certain parts of vehicles out of than steel or other things that were available at the time. That's still true. And then when you look at the amount of hydrocarbon-based plastic that's used the world over, and you see the damage that it's doing to our environment, not just in the clutter and the awful amount of refuse that's not biodegrading fast enough. When it does biodegrade, hydrocarbon-based plastics, they produce things like toluene and benzene that are incredibly damaging to the environment. Well, it turns out that hemp-based plastic can biodegrade without producing those types of negatives. And there are scientists who are currently saying that there will be an ability to create biodegradable hemp plastic that will be able to dial in how long it takes to decay. Does it decay inside of it? And then when you think about the fact that that would become the largest potentially carbon negative industry on Earth, pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, putting it into the plant, making plastics out of it that then go into landfill and biodegrade into natural substances, you're essentially sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere into the earth in what could be potentially the largest carbon negative industry in the world. That's not even talking about hemp for paper or hemp for fabrics or any of the other uses.
Could you share with us your top new applications or medicinal products currently being developed or that are already out there working that get you excited?
The thing that we've been seeing that has been amazing that is being developed for cannabis is now there are people who have discovered that topicals are actually incredibly effective. And I think we're going to see a lot more activity there. There is one of our partners, Lindy Snyder, has a company called Lindy Skin, and she has been looking at topicals that are based upon cannabis that she is going to be looking to go through clinical trials where necessary, but in many cases it won't be necessary, but she's going to be looking to prove efficacy without having to go through an FDA trial. And she has found incredible results already. There are now products coming to market that are going to be, there are strains of cannabis that are being developed that are showing remarkable new traits. For example, strains of cannabis that are high in something called tetrahydrocannabivarin, THCV. THCV is showing a tremendous amount of efficacy, anecdotally, in modulating blood sugar and in a positive way, reducing blood sugar levels in people that utilize it, while also curbing the appetite, while also apparently showing anecdotal results at this point that it is increasing insulin sensitivity in people who are borderline type 2 diabetics, essentially taking them out of borderline status back into a healthier position by having their body become more sensitive to their own insulin. So those are some of the things that I find the most exciting that we're discussing and seeing developed today.
Generally speaking, and really in a nutshell, how much institutional money is on the sidelines waiting for federal legalization?
Hundreds of billions. Hundreds of billions.
Leslie, can you give us a profile of the modern era customer for recreational cannabis?
The fastest growing new demographic of cannabis users, I believe, are women over 50.
Interesting. And these are
And
working class, upper class women?
oh, these are everyone. The thing is, cannabis is not being used as, so first off, let's start with another level set. Cannabis is non-toxic. There has never been a reported overdose death from cannabis overdose.
That's true.
There are more deaths from aspirin there are thousands of deaths from aspirin compared to cannabis every year. So it's not an intoxicant because it's not toxic. What we're finding is more people buy cannabis because it alleviates symptoms, whether it is anxiety, insomnia, or pain, than buy it to go get high. That's part of what a friend of mine, Rick Cusick, used to say is an artifact of the war on drugs. These are artifacts of prohibition that are based upon propaganda and lies, and they have nothing to do with reality. The idea that people buy cannabis to get high. They don't. They buy it to feel better. And that isn't the same as getting high. People buy it because it helps them relax, because it helps them enjoy a meal more, because it helps them avoid pain symptoms, because it helps them alleviate pain symptoms, because it helps them with insomnia, because it helps them with anxiety. These are the primary reasons people buy it, not just to get high. It's not like alcohol. It's a completely different thing. And so what we're seeing is that the new consumers are people that realize this. And they say, oh, wait a minute. You mean I can go buy some cannabis instead of going to my doctor and talking about getting a prescription of Tramadol or of Vicodin? And so probably one of the most significant tools that the consumer will use in helping to reduce the opiate epidemic in the United States will be cannabis use as it becomes more available.
What does your company, Electrum Partners, do?
We're a strategic advisory and business advisory firm. We really, if I were to say there's two areas that we specialize in. We specialize in the business owners that are looking to create businesses that will, but one day they believe and hopefully will be worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, that will be national or international or at least super regional businesses, brands and things like that. We assist those businesses in making the right decisions to be able to execute on their business and getting and what they need to do to be capital ready as they need to raise money. Then we assist them at times in how they can go find that capital. We don't raise money, but we know what needs to be done for people to do it. We also have been contacted by many people who are looking to deploy capital in the industry and asking, what should they be looking at? How should they be making their decisions? We utilize some intellectual property developed by a company called Blue Moon Advisors. That is the Capital Readiness Report. That is a 307 data point, 100 category, 10 section, very deep dive due diligence analysis that gets done on the businesses we look at, that assists the businesses in seeing where they have their shortcomings that they need to improve to be able to be more ready for capital, and assists investors in being able to evaluate a business's ability to take capital in and then hopefully execute on the business model. And so if I were to sum it up, we're business advisors and strategic advisors that specialize in the cannabis industry with some intellectual property tools where we're assisting investors and business owners that are looking to build big businesses and deploy large amounts of capital in the industry.
Thanks for being with us today, Leslie. It meant a lot.
My pleasure. I look forward to hearing this, seeing more from you as things go on.
The cannabis legalization process both in the US and in Canada is happening right now. Wealth Research Group has been carefully and intensively conducting due diligence and in-depth analysis on the incredible opportunities of this sector. It is by far one of the most attractive investment sectors of the next coming years. The assured demand from the medicinal and the recreational market is staggering. Go to wealthresearchgroup.com/cannabis to become privy as to some of the important stats and figures on the profitable aspects of this end of prohibition. In a nutshell, Cannabis is the fastest growing business in the world. 29 countries are in the process of legalizing. California and Canada are next on that list. Germany is an important progressive country as well. There are tons of scientific data coming out and many attributes of this plant and its active ingredients, as much as a lot of online documentaries to help prepare public awareness. It's huge, and it's one of Wealth Research Group's main focal points in the coming year. We will be publishing specific investment opportunities going forward, so make sure you're subscribed. Thank you for joining us today and stay engaged.